volunteers. And if you're staying here, open to Genesis chapter 43. And that is where we pick up the story of Joseph. Over the past few weeks, we've been walking through this story, and the place where we pick up today is kind of the place where the stage is set for the final meeting of Joseph with his brothers. Kind of the moment where Joseph will have the opportunity to forgive and to reconcile. The opportunity to look at his brothers who had betrayed him and sold him into slavery, and his brothers who had been callous to his cries for help, who had been responsible for the 13 years that he spent in slavery in Potiphar's house and in a prison in Egypt. And Joseph will look at them and say, "Don't be distressed." He will look at them and say, "Don't be angry with yourselves for what you did to me." Now, how can someone say something like that to the brothers who were supposed to protect him, who were supposed to look after him as their younger brother, but instead they hated him, they despised him so much that they wanted him dead. They were going to kill him, but settled instead for making a little money on the side by selling him into slavery and sentencing him to a lifetime of slavery in Egypt. How could Joseph just say, "Don't be distressed"? How can he come to the place of not just forgiving them? Because it's a little bit different to forgive someone than to say to somebody, "Don't be angry at yourself." Somehow that's even more amazing in my mind, that he not only forgives, but cares for them in such a way that he doesn't want them even to be angry with themselves. Because honestly, sometimes, even if I forgive someone, I still want them to be a little distressed about it. Don't you? It would be nice if you were a little distressed by what you did. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe that's petty, but if someone takes the last piece of cake in the workroom, hey, I can be the bigger person. I can forgive, okay? I was gonna eat that, but I can forgive. At the same time, though, I'd like for you not to enjoy that cake quite as much. Maybe have a little distress about it, because Collin was gonna eat that cake. Joseph does not react in that way. He does not wish that for them. What Joseph could have done, I think, and what I probably, I think what I would have done is take that moment to rehearse all the story of what exactly I had suffered in the meantime. Let me just tell you exactly what you put me through. You don't know about the dungeon, Joseph might have said. You don't know about the false accusation from my master's wife. You don't know about the wrongful imprisonment for years. You don't know about the hopelessness and the darkness of those days that you put me through. See, I would need them to know all of that. But Joseph doesn't start there. How is that possible? Well, part of the answer to the question is in the story itself. Joseph does forgive his brothers, but he doesn't reconcile with them on their first meeting. On their first meeting, Joseph couldn't actually reconcile with them because he didn't know what was in their hearts. Joseph was in the position of someone who might say, "I forgive you," but the other person says, "Forgive me? You had it coming, buddy. You got what you deserved. I don't need your forgiveness." You can't forgive and reconcile with someone who doesn't own their own guilt, who doesn't acknowledge their part. So what Joseph did was devise a kind of test, right? He accused them of being spies and took Simeon hostage, put him in prison. And then he sent the other brothers back and told them, "Hey, if you're telling me the truth, that you're not spies in the land of Egypt, then prove to me what you've said about your younger brother is true." Now, they don't understand who this is. I don't know why this person's questioning them about, their brother. "Bring your youngest brother Benjamin back to me." Okay, well, when the 9 brothers leave without Simeon, they find that all the silver that they used to buy grain in Egypt, they found the silver in their sacks. They didn't know what had happened. What if they were being framed for robbery at this point? Should they even go back and risk Benjamin's life as well? And their father Jacob says, absolutely not. You can't go back. Simeon's probably dead. Joseph's already dead. Will you bereave me of my last son? Jacob refuses to allow Benjamin to go back. But the famine is so severe, they don't have any food. It just continues to be so bad that Jacob doesn't have a choice. He says to his sons, go back to Egypt, buy more food. But Judah speaks up at this point and says, if we can't go back unless Benjamin's with us. The man in charge was emphatic about that. We don't know why. They still have no idea it was really Joseph. We don't know why he questioned us so much about our father and younger brother, but it doesn't matter, because if you don't send Benjamin and us, we're going to all die of hunger anyway. And so Judah says, let us go, and I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible, Judah says, for Benjamin. If I don't bring him back to you and set him here before you, I'll bear the blame all my life. So Jacob says, okay, go. And this time take double the amount of silver to repay what was left in your sacks last time. So they come back to Egypt. And they find Joseph. They don't really know it's Joseph. And to their surprise, they are told that they are invited to be guests in this Egyptian prime minister's house. It's really Joseph, but they have no idea. They're very suspicious, actually. They think that this is really some ploy to arrest them because of the silver or something. But the steward of the house says, no, I received your silver. I got your silver. The books are all balanced, he says. And then he says something really strange. He says, your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. He says, it's a gift from God. And then he brings Simeon out from the prison to join them and says, you're going to have a meal. And this is a hint. This is a really weird thing for an Egyptian to say, but obviously Joseph is the one who put the silver in the sacks, but it's a hint that God is actually in this. It's a subtle clue that God's hand is directing the meeting. God's hand is working in the hearts of the brothers, as we see from their suspicion at every turn. God is pricking their hearts because at every turn they keep thinking, somehow this has something to do with what we did so many years ago. So they come into Joseph's house for the meal, and they bow down to Joseph. Twice it tells us this. This emphasizes the fulfillment of Joseph's dream from 22 years ago. Another hint that God has ordained this time, this spot, this meeting. Let's pick up there in verse 29, Genesis chapter 43. Verse 29 says, as he looked about, that's Joseph, looked about and saw his brother, Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. And deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out, and controlling himself, he said, serve the food. Let's skip to verse 33 here. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest. And they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. And so they feasted and they drank freely with him. Why is Joseph seating them in order of birth? Do you see what Joseph is doing? He's showing favoritism to the youngest. He greets him with a special greeting. God be gracious to you. And then he serves the meal, seating them oldest to youngest as a way of recreating the tension and sibling rivalry and ranking. And he favors the last, the youngest, Benjamin, with the larger portions of food than anyone else. If any jealousy existed towards Benjamin from any of the other brothers at this point, this kind of special treatment from such a powerful figure as the prime minister of Egypt would surely have gotten under the skin of the brothers. Joseph is laying the groundwork carefully for the final test of the hearts of his brothers. But it's clear that he can barely control his tears. He's overwhelmed with emotion. This ruse is not easy. He's going to place them in a position where the brothers will be strongly tempted to treat Benjamin as they had treated Joseph so many years earlier. And if they respond with jealousy and hatred, Joseph will know they haven't changed at all. But if they respond with loyalty, then this test will prove their repentance. not just to Joseph, but to the brothers themselves. Because sometimes you might not know if you have truly repented until you find yourself in the same situation and discover that you can't act in the way that you acted before. The situation is the same, but you are different. So here's the setup. Joseph tells his steward to fill the men's sacks with grain and to put the silver back in the sacks, but to put a special silver cup, a special silver goblet that belonged to Joseph, to put that in Benjamin's sack, the youngest one's sack. And he's going to frame Benjamin as a thief. And then he sends them away, and here's what happens in verse 3 of chapter 44. This is the next chapter, verse 3. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They hadn't gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil with good, or good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you've done.' And when he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, 'Why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves.' 'Very well then,' the steward says, 'let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave, and the rest of you will be free from blame.' Not exactly the same thing. Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this they tore their clothes, and then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city." Now the choice before them is momentous. The band of brothers will be free to go. So would they? Benjamin appears to be guilty. I mean, it appears that he's stolen the cup after all, and now will face the judgment of the master over all the land of Egypt. They don't know for certain that Benjamin is innocent, and this is absolutely key to the story. For all they know, Benjamin might have stolen the cup. Let him get what's coming to them. You know, he's the one who did it. We didn't do anything. It's his fault. This is the choice they have. When faced with the pressure to abandon their youngest brother to slavery, would they? The past was rising up to meet them, to face them. When faced with the opportunity to be rid of the youngest brother who had been shown so much favoritism, would they leave, or would they stick with Benjamin come what may? And I'm sure that Benjamin protested his innocence, but we don't get any of that in the story. Benjamin never speaks a word. What comes next is the defense, but it doesn't come from Benjamin. It comes from Judah. It's Judah who stands up to speak before Joseph. Judah, the same one who convinced the rest of the brothers to sell Joseph in the first place, speaks now. If anyone bears the lion's share of the guilt, so to speak, of Joseph's fate, it was Judah. And all the suspense and the tension of the story kind of slows down and focuses on these two sons of Jacob, Joseph and Judah, so that Judah becomes the representative of the rest. And listen to what he says in verse 14. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this you've done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination?" "What can we say to my Lord?" Judah replied. "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt." See that? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. Judah is not pleading their innocence. He doesn't say, "Our brother's innocent. None of us stole the cup. Let us go." Now, presumably, he doesn't know whether Benjamin is really innocent or not. But that's not the issue for him right now. He says, God has uncovered the guilt of your servants. We've tried to get away from this for 20 years. We've tried to run from what we've done. We've tried to lie to our father and bury it. Our father who has grieved for 2 decades the loss of his son, our brother. And we've kept up the lie and the charade, but finally it's caught up with us. This is the work of God to bring us to reckoning for what we've done. Now, of course, he can't say all this to some Egyptian stranger, so he shapes his speech as something that's kind of ambiguous. On the surface, he's simply accepting the guilt of the stolen cup, because either Benjamin really has stolen the cup or God has placed the cup in there as an act of judgment. But either way, Judah knows in his spirit, this is about our old guilt. We are guilty. The guilt we must accept now with whatever consequences there are. And whatever divine retribution is in this, we have to accept it as just. So Judah says, we are now my Lord's slaves. We ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. But Joseph said, far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found with the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in, say it with me, peace. Shalom, peace. I wonder if that's something Judah had been longing for a long time. Peace. What must that be like? You think Judah has had peace for the last 22 years? Nope. So it comes to this. Judah could go home. Will he take the out? Will he save his own skin and leave Benjamin in Egypt? Or does he see that there can be no peace as long as he runs from his guilt? And what follows is the longest speech in the book of Genesis, and one of the most poignant and eloquent in all of the Old Testament. Verse 18, then Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my Lord. Let me speak a word to my Lord. Don't be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, do you have a father or brother? And we answered, we have an aged father, and there's a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he's the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me so I can see him for myself. And we said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die. But you told your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my Lord had said. Then our father said, go back and buy a little more food. But we said, we can't go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go. We can't see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, and I said, he's surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you'll bring my gray head down to the grave in misery. So now if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I don't bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please, let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, don't let me see the misery that would come on my father. Judah's passionate request is, take me. I will offer myself. I will stand as a substitute for the boy. The same man who hatched the plan to sell Joseph, he stands before Joseph now humbled, exposed, ready to sacrifice himself, and says, take me, let him go. And Judah didn't know it was a ruse. He had no idea it was a contrived scenario. He thought this was real. The only way to save the boy is if I offer myself in his place. And the truth is, Judah says, I really deserve to be in his place, because it's finally time for me to own the past. Judah is a profoundly changed man. He is humbled by his sin and transformed by the power of God into a brother who is loyal and self-sacrificing, the opposite of the brother at the beginning of this book, Cain. Joseph can no longer control himself. He can't hold back his tears. He clears the room of everyone else except his brothers. And it says he wept so loud that he could be heard throughout the house. This whole section is bathed with emotion and closeness and tears of sympathy and love. It's one of the most powerful scenes of reconciliation, not just in the Bible, but in any literature. He says to his brothers in verse 3, chapter 45, Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. And then Joseph said to his brothers, listen to this, come close to me. And when they had done so, he said, I am your brother, Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. Notice how he identifies himself as the one whom they sold into Egypt. He names them as his offenders. He's not saying what they did was right or good. And yet, then he says, don't be distressed, don't be angry with yourselves. He has compassion for his brothers. It's like he loves them. And he's not going to hold their crime against them or make them repay the debt that they owe him. Last week, we kind of drew a line between the work of internal forgiveness and the more relational work of reconciliation and restoration. And it seems to me that prior to this moment of reconciliation, Joseph had already decided in his heart to forgive their debt to him. He's already done that. Probably long ago, he had decided not to seek repayment for what they took. But if you read the rest of Joseph's words, you see that the story was not ultimately headed towards forgiveness as the climax of the story. Instead, it was headed towards this statement. And now, don't be distressed and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me here. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But, say it with me, God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. God sent, God sent, God sent 3 times. This is the key to the story. How can Joseph say, don't be distressed, because the tragedy of their sin was going to be the stage on which a much bigger story was going to play out? Don't be distressed because God sent. God was writing this whole other story. It was by God's hand and it was in God's time. And does that mean that what the brothers did wasn't so bad after all? Not at all. It's not that evil is called good, it's that evil is turned for good. Joseph could have wished to go back and undo the hurt, but in light of what God has done through it, he sees now that through God's power, it had become the occasion for Judah's beautiful act of self-sacrifice. It had become the occasion, made possible the exaltation of Joseph in Egypt. It had paved the way for God's work of deliverance and rescue of his family from famine and many others from famine. Because the purposes of God never fail. They'll never be thwarted by evil. His hand cannot be stayed by the workings of sinful men. God would turn the world's sin into the occasion for the most beautiful act of self-sacrifice in history, the cross. Our separation from God would pave the way for the most glorious act of reconciliation. Our betrayal and faithlessness would pave the way for the most wondrous display of faithfulness. And this is what makes it possible for Joseph to say, don't be angry with yourselves, because he sees that this is a story that's not just about the hurt. If this story were just about Joseph and his brothers and the hurt, then all you would have is victim and perpetrators, victim and offenders. And it's not just a matter of victim and offenders. There's another character in the mix, and it's God. There's another story being told. It's not just a story of victim and offenders. It's God's story. And one of the most beautiful elements of the story, I think, is the way that Judah's willingness to stand as a substitute foreshadows and points forward to Jesus, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the head of the tribe, even though he would be born centuries later. Jesus, who did give himself as a perfect substitute in dying for sinful men and women so that they could be reconciled to God the Father. This is early evidence in Scripture that substitution lies at the heart of forgiveness and reconciliation. I don't know if there's someone that comes to mind when you think of forgiveness. Someone who owes you something, or someone who took something from you. Maybe someone who wronged you, who hurt you. You could seek repayment. Maybe you know that they could never repay the debt they owe anyway, that they could never give back what they took. So you're at an impasse in the story of victim and offender. But I wonder what it would look like to consider the other character in the story. The story is never just about you and your hurt or me and my wounds. The story is never just about victim and offender. What would it look like to consider that the person who hurt you, whoever he is, whoever she is, has a substitute? What if into your situation Jesus said, I'll be a substitute for them. I'll take the guilt against you on my shoulders. Let them go. I'll bear the cost. Release them. And whatever it is that they took from you, whatever it is that they owe you, charge it to my account. I'm the only one who can restore. I'm the only one who can repay. I'm the only one who can redeem anyway. If Jesus were standing there, willing to be their substitute, would you then be willing to say, I release it. I forgive the debt. You don't owe me anything anymore. I think that can happen regardless of whether or not there is ever reconciliation in the relationship. And if that happens, then you're in a position to see the story that God is telling with your life, which is a story not just about you and your hurt. It's a story about how God is taking hurt and sin and brokenness and making that the stage where the grace and the redemption and the salvation of Jesus is put on display. Now that won't undo what is evil, and it won't undo what is painful, but it will transform it into an occasion for something new and beautiful, for God to tell a story through it. Now, how God does that, the mystery of all of that, it's not something that this story really tries to work out, except to say that God is on a mission to turn the ugliness of sin into an occasion for beauty and reconciliation and forgiveness and salvation. And by the way, God's purposes never fail. Let's pray.